Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Logical NDE. We are dedicated to bringing you interesting stories of near-death experiences from people from all over the world. On today's episode, we are going to be sharing with you a very touching and educative NDE from Jodie O'Meara. She will be narrating this story herself. Listen to her as she narrates her NDE.
Back in 2009, basically I was pregnant with my daughter, and this is where my NDE basically happened. So I was pregnant with my daughter, I was 24 weeks, and I presented with preeclampsia, and that's quite unusual at 24 weeks. So they pop me into hospital and basically tell you you're going to have a premature baby. It's just a balancing act of how long they keep the baby inside you and keep you well at the same time. So the mother is only going to get better once the baby's taken out. So I because I was so naive, it was my first child, I just went with it all a little bit and kind of didn't really understand fully how serious it all was. I thought I was going to be in hospital from 24 weeks right through to the end, and I was a bit depressed about that. But I was more upset about that. But obviously I wasn't. So at 26 weeks, they took the baby out, and I'm just sort of leading up to spiritual things were starting to happen because I was getting sicker and sicker. And I was presenting with, with preeclampsia. I blew up you just bloat something chronic, and you get really bad headaches, and you can't keep things like the pills and the tablets down that they're giving me for my blood pressure and things. Really, what's happening is your DNA or your genetics is rejecting. It thinks the baby. But it starts to attack the body, basically attack itself to get rid of it. And then the only way to get the mum well is to get the baby out. And preeclampsia normally comes on a lot later in the pregnancy or even during birth and afterwards. So this was quite unusual, and they couldn't understand why I was presenting so early. So it's about keeping me quiet. I was in a room by myself and just trying to keep me calm and things like that. But I think it was so they kept taking me down to the birthing unit because each day they would sort of think we might take the baby out today, and then they would take me back up if they decided not to. And one night I was on the ward and I was asleep, and I woke up and I just thought, I don't know how to, it was like a knowing, and I saw a shadow person. So when I see spirit, there's shadow people. And so it's like seeing your shadow, you know how you use grainier. And so I saw this shadow standing beside my bed, and I just popped into my head, it's Eleanor. So Eleanor is my great aunt. And I never met her. It was amazing, and that if we'd got to meet, we would have got on really well because we had a lot of interests that were the same, with antiques and all sorts of things. But so, I just thought, it's Eleanor. And I just had this overwhelming feeling of calm, like I just knew everything was going to be fine. And that wasn't that, I wasn't going to die or that I was going to live or whatever, but just that everything would be fine. There was just this overwhelming feeling of peace and acceptance. So as things went along and I started getting even sicker, they took me down to the birthing unit, and I started to have really bad pains in my right hand side where my liver is, and it got very hard, and I was in a lot of pain, like it was excruciating, and it started to transfer up my back and up my neck. So the midwife at the time said to me, I think we really need to get this baby out. But they were sort of fighting between themselves, the staff, as to how long to keep the baby in and all that sort of stuff. So it was all a bit dramatic. But anyway, and they decided the next day to take the baby. And I was completely calm through everything. So everything they were doing, anything they said, I was just very accepting, very calm. Everything was fine. While everybody else around me was sort of getting quite panicky and quite upset. So they took me into the emergency room, and the surgeon, prepped me, and I couldn't get the epidural in by sitting up. Normally a woman can get it by sitting up, but I couldn't sit up. I was in so much pain. So they did it while I was lying down, and that took ages. And then finally they got it in. And so I'm lying there and I'm all relaxed. Literally, I was like, it was like I was on a day at that's the thing. And they kept saying that, the doctors kept saying that to me. I can't believe how relaxed you are. But yeah. And so then when they opened me up and they took Evelyn, my daughter, out, I just had this weird feeling that things were going to go haywire. I can't describe it. I had this funny feeling. And they said to me, would you like your husband to go with your daughter or would you like him to stay with you? And I said, I think he should go with my daughter. So it's literally, I remember seeing his leg go out the door. Next minute, the whole room filled up with all these doctors and there's all this whispering going on. And I could see when she had opened me up, she'd said to the other doctors, there's old blood in here. And so meanwhile, unbeknownst to me, they'd rung an emergency liver surgeon. And so what had basically happened, it's like when you go in a car accident and the impact, you get internal bleed, had that same effect. And so it was bleeding out into my belly and had been for some time. So later on, when you get to piece all these things together and talk to staff and things like that, they basically said I had 6 hours, another 6 hours, and I would have been toast. Find that out until a lot later because they don't really want to admit that they've left you too long, which is cool. But so then the surgeon came in and it all got a bit rough because they said they had to cut me up further. Was that okay? But you just go here, do what you need to do. And so it was really rough because he was packing me with gauze and things. It was really rough. So in the end, I said to them, I think I've had enough. And I think you can put me out now. That's how I said it. I literally said, I think I've had enough. You can just put me out now. And this is the part that kind of, I don't know how to describe this part. So the next thing I remember is waking up in ICU with the tube down my throat and being a bit distressed by that and pulling the tube out. But I have a lot of memories that are sort of, I can't quite piece them together as the time frame. But one of the memories that I have is seeing my parents standing by the bed and feeling, I can't even describe, like this huge amount of love for them and wanting to give it to them. Like I really badly wanted to give this love that I was feeling. I wanted them, so I was trying to sort of push it onto them, if like waves, I was trying to, and as far as I was concerned, I wasn't speaking to them. But my mother later told me that I was saying, everything's fine, everything's going to be okay, it's all fine, Jesus is here. And I don't remember saying that. I do not remember saying that. I just remember feeling this love for them and wanting them to feel good and feel okay and them to be okay. So then I remember, basically I remember someone being with me, and I remember being in a void, what I call the void. I've heard other people call it this too. So for me it was black. But it wasn't that horrible sort of dense black, like a night black sky. It was this sort of soft, charcoaly, a bit like the Milky Way, sort of misty, and a few sprinkling of stars sort of way off in the distance, and maybe a slight little bit of pink. But so I knew someone was with me. I knew they were male. Don't ask me how, I just did. And I couldn't see them, but I could feel them. And I felt really good, like really good, really relaxed, just floaty, really floaty. Yeah. And a friend of mine who's also a little bit sensitive, but we'd never really talked about it, unbeknownst to me, this is all stuff I've pieced together from talking to people, is she said that I came to her and that I was hovering above her and I was smiling at her. And she sat up in bed and said to her husband, "Oh my God, I think Jodie's dead. I think Jodie's died." And he said, "Oh, you better ring her mum and find out what the hell's going on." So I do think this was around that time. So yeah, it's really interesting that I travelled. So that's quite interesting too. And I think for me personally, some people, they get that clinical knowledge from this medical staff that they actually died, whereas for me, I didn't, because they didn't really want to tell me. So there's sort of did I or didn't I, if you know what I mean? But I think, I definitely came as close as it gets. And I have a photograph of myself, and I have that same colour to my skin that people have when they're paler to their skin, when they've so, and I had to have huge amounts of blood. I had about 19 units of blood transferred into me. I lost a lot of blood, and definitely, that feels right. That feels really right too. These things with the NDEs, you can't explain every NDEs. They want us to prove things, and they want to prove that we were clinically dead and all this sort of stuff, but we can't differences too, because we're all unique, and that's what I believe. We're all unique souls, so of course we're going to have a different experience compared to the next person, but there's always those little similarities, and the void is one of those. And a lot of this I didn't have the language for back then, but I understand where I'd been. I could only describe it. This is stuff I've learnt over the last years, from just doing research and talking to people who've had them as well, and going, oh my God, that's what I experienced too. It's a whole other language. It's absolutely a whole other language. And I think, so I was floating there. It was Jesus, or it could have been God, I don't know. But to me, in my mind, it was Jesus, and that's woke that and had an experience when I woke up that was Jesus, as far as I was concerned. So the biggest thing that people are always shocked by, and I get a lot of questions about this, is I am not religious, and I'm still not religious. Even though I believe I've met Jesus, I'm not religious. But I do believe I met Jesus. I do believe that in Jesus, as a person that was a ascended master and came with this beautiful philosophy which was spread across the earth, and everybody kind of put their own interpretations on it, and all that sort of stuff happened. But to me, he's more like a friend and a brotherly figure, or a paternal figure. That's how he feels to me. And I don't see him as the sensationalized version that other people do. So I don't feel that way. And I never got that sense from him that I had to fall down on my knees and suddenly kind of accept him as my savior and all those things. It wasn't like that. It was very nurturing, like your father kind of helping you and embracing you and just making you feel better because you've fallen over and hurt yourself or something. Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, the love was just so, and it was like it sounds funny because you're a consciousness, but it felt warm. It felt really warm and really nice, and there was no fear whatsoever. I didn't feel any fear. And he just hung out to my left. He was on my left-hand side. I remember that. And I don't remember his voice. I remember like an impression in my mind's eye, quite Middle Eastern looking. And yeah, I remember that. No, none of that long hair and all that sort of stuff. More sort of slightly long but shorter, if you know what I mean, like sort of my daughter. And he showed me their life. So in pictures, it was like watching a movie of what their life would be like without me if I wasn't in it. And I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel upset. It was this all-knowing feeling that was just how it would be. Yeah, I'd love that. But so I just, it was beautiful. I just watched, and obviously it wasn't all going to be easy, but wonderful and marvelous for them. They were going to go through their trials and tribulations, but it would just be a different life experience without me in it. And that was okay. There was a feeling of that's okay. It's just different. It's not bad or good. There was no sort of attachment to it of being a tragedy or sort of really awful, but it's a different life experience. They can either have that or they can have you in it, so to speak, So I did not get a choice to come back. I didn't ask, didn't plead. There was no, do you want to stay or go, or no, it's not your time or anything like that. I just suddenly woke up and I was back in my body. But I do remember at different times throughout in ICU a feeling of not being quite tethered to my body, sort of a feeling of, whereas some people talk about themselves being high on the semi, it was closer. I was closer to my body, but I wasn't quite in my body. It's a sort of a bit, yeah. So with that, I started to have experiences of the people around me. And I started to experience, there was a baby on my left who was very, very sick and gravelly, like she obviously had breathing issues. I knew she was going to live. I knew she was going to be fine. And then there was a guy on my right, and he was, in New Zealand, we have, Indigenous culture is Maori, and he was a Maori man, and all his family were with him. But for me, I was experiencing his ancestors. So I could see all these shadow people, like masses of them, like going, I just can't even describe it. And it was like it was still in the void. So I could just see them all lining up and gathering around him. And the feeling was very dense and very sorrowful and kind of resigned. And it felt uncomfortable for me because I was going through, a lot of trauma, and I was having these weird experiences, and I was sort of like, what is this? And now that I know what I know, I'm like, so that was his ancestors coming to meet him and collect him. But the feeling was, and I've had this feeling before with spirit who are tormented or have been a difficult person in life, but they have a denser feeling. That's the only way I can describe it. And people who haven't experienced this probably won't get it. But if you're sensitive, you can go into spaces and places and you'll just feel like something's really doesn't feel good, heavy, and that's why I call it a dense feeling. So you just feel like something is not right, it's wrong, something feels very wrong here. There's different levels of it. So this for me was, obviously this guy for me had not been a very good person in life. And the feeling from his ancestors were that he was going to go through some sort of process or some sort of, I don't know, I call it an atonement, but I sort of felt like it was more of a loving process, that they were coming to collect him, and they felt sad and resigned that he was going to have to go through this process and come to grips with who he had been and how he had behaved and how he treated people and things like that. The beautiful thing is you are caretaken through that. So so his ancestors had come to help him go through that. But so there's an understanding, I feel. I mean, obviously there are really bad people out there. I don't know like how that's all processed, but this is what I felt with this guy. And I felt it with a few others since as well, is that there's this understanding and a sort of it's a loving thing, it's a growth thing for them, or an expansion for them that they go through. Yeah. Yeah. So that was that. And then I found I sounded really key. By now, I'm sort of woken up in the bed and I'm flat on my back and various things are happening and I felt like I was hit by a bus, honestly. It was just, and I felt like my stomach was still open. And later on I found out that it actually was. Keep it open a bit so that, because they go in and out to pack your liver, and then they check that it stopped bleeding, and then they have to put a lining over it like Glad wrap to make it, sealed again and heal and all that. So they go in and out. But I was in there for 5 days, and I really did. I thought if I looked down that I'd see my stomach all open. That's how it felt to me. And then I don't know how many days this was. I have no recollection sort of timing. But I just remember my husband was sitting next to me and he was reading a book. And I was lying there and I said to him, I just felt this person come in. And I said to him, there's a woman here. There's a woman here. And he said, no, Jodie, there's no one here. And I said, yeah, there's a woman here. And then I felt the depression, when someone sits on your bedside, sits down on you, I felt that. And I said, yeah, she's just sat on the bed. And he said, no, there's no one there, Jodie. And I said, yeah. And then I felt her touch my tummy. I knew it was a her. I don't know why. I just knew it was she was a female, and I felt her touch my tummy. I didn't know her. I don't recall who she, because sometimes you have a knowing of who it is. But when someone touches your tummy, like they just sort of go, like just really lightly, and you just feel it lightly. So that's how it felt. And then it felt like a pond. So it just was like this spreading, like a ripple in a pond, and it felt all cool and really nice. Gosh, it felt so good on my stomach. So I think that was a healing. And then I could feel that something was coming. This is the only way I can describe it. I knew something big was coming. Like, it just was the energy was so profound. And it was at the very foot of my bed. And it came, and next, I think my poor husband, I said to him, "Oh, there's no one here." I said, "Yes, this is here. He's here." And he was going, "No, Jodie, there's no one here." And it just was like a wave, like, a massive big wave. And it just, this love of like all the love in the world. It was like love on steroids. It was incredible. And it just went boof over the top of me. And it's just incredible. I've never felt anything like it. It was amazing. And like, oh my God. And I just couldn't, like, and here's me going, it's Jesus is here. And I'm just not that sort of person. Yeah, absolutely not. And, my poor husband's going, no. Later on, as life went on, I sort of talked a bit about it in the hospital with people. Like, I told my mum and dad, and that's when my mum said, "Oh, that's interesting, because you were talking about Jesus when we came to see you in ICU. You were saying he was there."
That's it for today, folks. Have you ever discovered a new realm in your near-death experiences? Have you seen Jesus or other crucial figures in your near-death experience? If yes, make sure to leave a detailed comment where we can read your thoughts on the experience and impact of your near-death moment. In case you like this video, do not forget to give it a big thumbs up. Also, subscribe to our channel to support us in growing it. Share the video with your friends and family so they can have a fair taste of life after death and near-death experiences through our channel. Until the very next time, stay blessed.